Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Julia here from Inspira Advantage. Really excited to bring this webinar alongside Benji to talk about how to get accepted to Texas medical schools. If you're interested in getting into these types of schools, this is the perfect webinar for you because we'll basically be giving you a deep dive on how you can expect to get accepted. Before we go ahead and get started, I just want to touch on a couple housekeeping things. If you haven't joined us for an Inspira webinar before, just note that these webinars are recorded and all attendees will be getting a recording of the webinar 24 hours after we finish. So stay tuned for that email and we'll be sending it out 24 hours, like I said. As we go through the webinar, we'll be touching on a lot of different topics. The agenda that we'll be talking about here is right here. We'll be touching on how the admissions work in Texas medical schools. We'll touch on key strategies for standing out and tips for the match system. And then, of course, we'll touch on non-resident applicant info as well. So before we even jump into what Inspira does and before we talk about the actual meat of the presentation, I just want to flag one more housekeeping thing. We are going to have a designated Q&A section at the end. So if you do have questions for Benji, I'd ask that you hang on to them and then type them in the chat box. If Benji has time, he can answer them, or sometimes the answers to these questions come up organically as we go through the webinar. But if not, we have that designated time where he'll be able to answer your question one-on-one. So hang tight, we'll get that question answered, whether it's throughout the webinar or afterwards in our designated Q&A section. Okay, so if you're just joining us for the first time, or if you don't really know a lot about Inspira and who we are and what we do, just want to give you guys a little background information on who we are. We're a globally recognized admissions consulting company, and we have over 16 years of experience. Our specialty is really helping students gain admission to top graduate healthcare programs, and that includes anything from medical, residency, dental, veterinary, and PA school, and we have a 98% acceptance rate with our students. We believe in starting early, which is why we offer pre-health advising for college freshmen. Our team helps students build tailored academic timelines, which include course selections and GPA strategy, or find impactful experiences like research, shadowing, clinical and non-clinical volunteering, extracurriculars, and leadership roles that could potentially beef up their med school application. And of course, we help to create a strong standout profile and make sure that undergraduate experiences check all the boxes and are highlighted and are what the top medical schools are looking for. By bringing all these steps together, we're able to kind of help our applicants leave an impression with this. In addition, our tutors help to provide personalized one-on-one test prep for the MCAT, DAT, and GRE. And with diagnostic tests, custom study plans, and interim progress tracking, students generally see score increases of an average of 15 points on the MCAT. Our 48 and 60-hour programs even include score guarantees, 515 on the MCAT, 21 on the DAT, and 320 on the GRE. When it's time to apply, our all-inclusive application programs offer unlimited support through the entire application cycle, which includes crafting a personalized narrative and school list, perfecting your personal statement and secondary essays with unlimited edits, and providing interview prep, scholarship guidance, and a waitlist strategy. Throughout the entire process, we're by your side until you receive your acceptance. Our goal is really simple. It's to create the most competitive candidates and applicants while ensuring our students shine in a competitive admissions landscape. If you'd like to learn more, we offer free personalized consultations via video, phone, or email. No matter where you are in the application process, we are here to help you get into the school of your dreams. Okay, with that said, I am going to let Benji introduce himself and have him kind of go over his expertise. Benji, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. My name is Benji Popok. I'm one of the admissions counselors with Inspira. I added a couple details here that I don't usually share, but because we're talking about Texas medical schools, wanted to give you all my background. I grew up in a town called Plano, Texas. It's about half an hour north of Dallas. And I attended undergraduate at UT Austin, so hook 'em if there's any Texas fans out there. I'm now a third-year medical student applying family medicine at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center back in Dallas near downtown. So I've been in Texas my whole life with just a brief stint in Austin. So let's talk about how Texas med school admissions work. We're going to save questions for the end, but one thing I would like to see is if you guys you can type in the chat what state y'all are joining in from, whether you guys are Texas or out of state, just so I can have an idea of where people are coming from. So there's two applications in the United States. There's the TMDSAS, which is specific for Texas school, and AMCAS, which is used by the rest of American medical colleges. TMDSAS is a separate application, not run by the AAMC, that includes 15 Texas allopathic medical schools as of this coming cycle, as well as 2 schools of osteopathic medicine, with unique deadlines, additional essays that may not be present on the AMCAS, and different GPA calculations. One thing that's new that you may have not heard about is that Baylor College of Medicine has recently joined TMDSAS. They were formerly AMCAS. Now, Texas, as well as many other states, do have tax programs and other state regulations that require a majority of in-state students be granted admission. In particular, Texas has a very high rate of 90% of Texas seats reserved for in-state applicants. More technically, it's saying that you can't have more than 10% out of state at any given Texas medical school because of certain state funding requirements. So being a Texas resident is a huge advantage. I see some people are checking in from Laredo. That's great. You'll have an advantage with TMDSAS, but there's still a way to guarantee a greatest chance if you're coming from another state. So I wanted to include a couple more details. Your best source, of course, is going to be the formal TMDSAS website. So in this top left, this is just a screenshot directly from the front page when you look up TMDSAS. They do a really good job of trying to simplify things with graphics, videos, tutorials, webinars, though I understand a lot of this can still be overwhelming, especially with how many schools there are. So you have dental, medical, veterinary, and podiatry. We're here to talk about medical today, and you can see on the right-hand side a list of all the Texas medical schools currently on the TMDSAS. As I mentioned, 2 of these are osteopathic schools. You can see Sam Houston, for example, as well as UNT, and then the rest are allopathic. One thing to make note of is there are still 2 schools that includes TCU. It's a new medical college, as well as the University of Incarnate Word in San Antonio. That's an osteopathic school that are not on TMDSAS. Those are both on AMCAS. So what is the advantage that Texas residents have and those who do get in-state tuition? Texas medical schools are extremely competitive in their tuition rates. The tuition rates for in-state students are particularly low, and frankly, the out-of-state rates can be lower than some other states' in-state rates. So overall, Texas is a really good deal, and with 90% of the seats reserved for Texas applicants, it's a really tough competition when you're applying out of states. People from all over are applying, trying to get competitive fees as well as good education. So Texas is really a great cost-effective option if that's something you're looking for, and especially if you qualify as a resident. I wanted to include just a couple statistics directly from the American Medical College's AMC. So, and the red box, you'll see this is some Texas school tuition costs. You can see in one column, it's the in-state, and then the other column, it's the out-of-state costs. And you can see if we're just looking at the tuition and fees section for both of these, really low. Most of the in-state in the low 20,000s for the year, and most of the out-of-state in the 30,000s. One that you'll notice I haven't included, but is a Texas school, is the School of Medicine at TCU. This is the one I mentioned is not included on TMDSAS. It's a private medical campus, and you'll see the costs are significantly higher, starting to be more similar to out-of-state schools. Please press. Yep. So again, I want to highlight this column, and if you compare these two, you can press the next one. If we compare these two, the in-state and out-of-state are always going to be different. In-state is cheaper, but many of the Texas schools out-of-state, you're looking at the double highlighted column on the right side, are going to be cheaper than other states. For example, looking at the bottom left, in-state tuitions. So Texas is a really good competitive option. Frankly, even if you get in with out-of-state tuition, you might be finding a better deal than, for example, Virginia Tech's in-state cost. Now, who is a Texas resident? Who's eligible to apply? Now, just moving to Texas a week before you submit your application isn't going to be enough. Just having a summer house in Texas isn't going to be enough. There's requirements for long-term ties. And so that can either include proof that you graduated from a Texas high school as well as had residency in that state in the state of Texas for 3 years preceding high school. Alternatively, establishing a domicile meaning domestic home, etc., through employment, owning a property and visiting that property, or a parent or spouse's residency will be your alternative option. So there's a lot of really good detailed information about exactly what establishing a domicile means on TMDSAS. And I encourage you to look into some of those details if you're looking to use one of those alternative methods if you're not originally from Texas. This is just a screenshot that I pulled directly from it, so we can briefly look over this. As I mentioned, if you're establishing residency through high school graduation from a Texas high school, you still have to have lived in Texas for 3 years before graduating, or have lived for 12 months by the application deadline. So, for example, if you're a parent joining this meeting and you really want to get that in-state tuition, you can't just move halfway through senior year and consider that as Texas residency. The second option is for those who are maybe coming from out of state or moving to the US, and there are still some requirements, including living in Texas for a year by the application deadline, or establishing a domicile in Texas by being gainfully employed, sole or joint marital ownership of residential property, owning and operating a business in Texas, or be married to someone who has established a domicile in Texas for at least 1 year. We talked a little bit at the beginning about key differences between TMDSAS and AMCAS, but I want to provide you with some more concrete details. The TMDSAS has additional essays with unique prompts. There's 2 additional essays in particular, one, the personal characteristics, and the other called an optional essay, which are crucial for standing out. They call it optional, but frankly, it's not. Everyone has to do this if you want a competitive chance, especially if you're applying out of state. TMDSAS also has unique methods of calculating GPA using all coursework, including repeated classes, which is different than AMCAS. There's some great details available online that get really into the details of which classes they're considering as part of science GPA, which are out of science GPA, which classes that are repeated are considered, how they take in dual credit, AP, etc. But please be aware that there are some differences and it may make some variation in your total calculated GPA. I wanted to include specifically the prompts that I'm mentioning here. Now, this top one, medical applicant personal statement, this is ubiquitous across the board, TMDSAS or AMCAS. Regardless of where you're applying, you're going to have to say, why medicine? This is your personal statement. The 2 unique ones for TMDSAS are this middle one, personal characteristics, which is asking you, as written, to describe personal qualities, characteristics, and/or lived experiences that could enrich the educational experience of others. You have 5,000 characters. And then this one underneath, optional essay, the symbols next to it dictate which schools need it, meaning all of the schools. The stethoscope being for medical applicants. Now, the optional essays prompt asks you to briefly discuss any unique circumstances or life experiences relevant to your application, which haven't been previously presented, either in these essays or some of the smaller essays where you have an opportunity to highlight certain volunteer activities, work, research, etc. Again, they call this one optional. It's truly not. This doesn't mean you need to make something up if you don't have it. What it means is you really need to spend time brainstorming, digging deep, talking to family, friends, perhaps working with an admissions counselor to figure out what is that unique thing that you haven't plucked out yet. What's that thing that maybe you left out in the back of your head because you didn't think it was important, but an admissions counselor or your parent or a friend will tell you, no, that's you. That makes you unique and makes you stand out as an applicant. So again, optional essay, not optional for TMDSAS. Now, timeline is critical. TMDSAS does operate, despite some of the schools saying they don't, it does operate on a rolling admissions basis. So what that means is applying earlier will boost your chances of acceptance. Admissions counselors from the Texas medical schools are looking at these applications as they roll in. Again, schools will post online and say that they're not considering it on a rolling basis, that they consider it cumulatively, but this is really critical nonetheless, statistically, to get your essays, to get your submissions in, your letters of rec, everything you can, ASAP. There are also some unique deadlines as opposed to AMCAS, and those can change year to year. They're not typically, months or lots of weeks apart, but they will be on the scale of days to a week or two apart. So if you're operating fully off of AMCAS, you should be aware that TMDSAS may be earlier for some of these. So we need to make a strategic plan for your timeline. Additionally, TMDSAS uses a ranking system. So once you get to the place where you know a number of your schools you've applied to, you've done your secondaries, etc., you really have to strategize the ranking system by which you put them. You rank the schools. They also rank all of their applicants and interviewees in certain brackets of A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, top to less preferred applicants. And the idea is within this matching system, applicants and schools will be matched with their highest preferred candidates both ways. The hope and idea here is to get as many people as possible matched to a school. This is a sample from entry year 2025 directly from TMDSAS. So this stuff is not hidden, it's not mystical, but does take some time to parse through and may take some time to work through with someone who has experience. You can see, for example, in the entry year 2025, May 1st is when the application becomes available. May 15th is when submission becomes open. What that means is you can start putting everything in May 1st. May 15th, you can press that submit button. I really encourage all of my mentees to have it ready by May 15th, which means we start working in April, March, whenever that needs to happen. Because you have all those essays. Those prompts aren't going to change. There's not going to be any surprises. Right now, if you're planning on applying this upcoming cycle, I found those prompts just by looking up TMDSAS medical school prompts, and so can you. You can take that time now to start brainstorming, make your maps, make your trees, start asking friends and family for help. Start thinking about working with an admissions counselor to see if you can have all this material ready, frankly, by May 1st, so you can just spend those 2 weeks polishing and navigating and making sure everything's put in correctly. We won't go through too many of the details here, but you can see that in October, for example, in that middle row, medical schools may start offering acceptance. It says acceptance on here, but really what it is pre-match. What that means is certain schools, if they rank you very highly, may tell you ahead of time, hey, we really like your application. We are offering you a pre-match. What that means is regardless of where you match them, they have matched you as their highest candidate. So it's a guarantee that if you match them as number one, you are going to that school. For many applicants, this can offer reassurance. And once they get their first pre-match, if they're happy with it, they're pretty much done. They know that they can rank that school as number one. The school has already ranked them as number one, and that's where they'll go on match day. This may offer you some time to start thinking about apartments, transportation, if you need to find a part-time job in that area, if you need to work with family to establish some new setup or new pattern in that new city. So many people really appreciate pre-match, but not everyone does pre-match. It's okay if you don't know until match day. That happens all the time. And many, many people still match to their program of choice. So how do you stand out? I know some of us are calling in from in-state, some of us are calling in from out of state, and so far, those who are out of state might be feeling a bit disparaged, you might be feeling anxious or nervous, and I want to reassure you that with the right preparation, the right time, and the right mindset, we can alleviate some of that anxiety. So how do you show that you're a good fit for Texas medical schools? First, just logistically, you have to check and make sure that you're eligible to apply. Make sure that you meet those requirements, whether by graduating a Texas high school or by establishing a domicile for at least 1 year. Once that's taken care of, if you're still worried, hey, I lived 80% of my life outside of Texas, I'm still relatively new. How can you showcase that you're a good applicant? Texas really likes service-oriented experiences. We are a state that really values stewardship, volunteerism, taking your personal time and giving it unto others. We want to serve underserved communities, and that doesn't always mean the urban underserved. If you're in a rural town, those people are also frequently underserved. You can be pretty creative with this. The elderly can tend to be an underserved population, not because they're hard to find or there's not many of them, but rather because there's not many geriatricians, for example. If you can highlight your commitment to working with folks who really need that help, especially in Texas, schools will love to see that. You want to emphasize whether you have family connections, you started a business, work connections, you plan to stay here, why you want to be in Texas to prove you're not just passing through for our cheap and strong medical schools. Now, you have a lot of places in which to do this. Obviously, your personal statement, personal characteristics, and optional essay are places in which you can do this. You also have in the TMDSAS a lot of smaller categories for activities, for volunteering, research, work experiences, etc. Of those, you'll get the opportunity to highlight, quote, most meaningful experiences. These are places where you can expand, not to the effect of a full essay, but more than just a line or two, about why those experiences were the most meaningful to you. Using good storytelling skills, conveying the message that you are a Texan, whether born here or made into a Texan. This is the way that you can stand out, especially as an out-of-state applicant. So I pulled this directly from University of Texas McGovern's webpage. This is the John P. and Catherine G. McGovern Medical School. Their criteria and requirements for medical school applicants. And you can notice one of these, a whole section, is potential for service to the state of Texas. State medical school must have a primary concern producing practitioners who will serve that state in residencies. Applicants' goals for the future, size and location of hometown, whether you're in a health profession shortage area, whether you'll be serving an underserved population, etc., are critical, for example, to UT McGovern. And this is pretty ubiquitous if you look up any of the other Texas medical schools. They'll have something along these lines. So again, Texas really wants to offer accessible, cheap medical education that is high quality for the sake of ideally making providers that will serve residents.
Okay, just want to take this opportunity to let you all know that just for attending our webinar, we are offering a 10% off discount for your entire program with Inspira. So if you're interested in working with a consultant like Benji, all you have to do is scan the QR code that you see here, and you'll get brought to our check-in or our homepage where you'll be able to look at all of the plans that we offer. Like I said, we'll be sending this webinar out to all attendees. So if you don't write this code down, or if you want to save it in your back pocket for later, it'll be available to be seen in the recording of the webinar that we'll be sending out. So just as a little thank you, that's what we're doing for you. So for sure, be sure to use it if you do plan on working with us. Okay, back over to you, Benji.
Great. So navigating this process, we talked a bit about the differences for TMDSAS. We talked about ways to stand out and what Texas medical schools are really looking for. Now, on your end, once you've gotten through that process and you've made yourself the strongest applicant possible, it's really important to understand the TMDSAS match process and what you should be matching based off of. You don't want to rank these schools just based off prestige, especially if you're coming from out of state and you don't have an idea of the different Texas city characteristics, the different lifestyles, the different focuses of these schools. You want to spend some time doing that, whether it's by taking a tour of Texas, if you have the financial means and the time to come visit. We'd all love to have you, especially if you come by Dallas. Let us know. But if you can't do that, really taking the time online, whether by watching some of the schools' videos, just researching the cities themselves, researching the populations they serve, and each of the schools' independent missions is going to be critical to figure out your actual preferences here. Because once you lock in, that decision is final, and you're actually required to rescind your offers and acceptances from the other schools, even if you've pre-matched. So you want to look up, it's quite easy to look up, for example, UT Del Medical Austin mission. And you'll find it's pretty distinct from the mission of UT Southwestern, which is pretty distinct from the mission of Texas Tech. We've got a lot of schools, a lot of characters, and they're each unique in their own way, as are you as applicants. And so finding the program that is a best match for you will guide the way that you make this rank list. Common mistakes. These are going to be the opposite of all the common suggestions that I have for you. Submitting late. A lot of people start to hear the idea that, oh, well, the schools are actually not rolling admissions. They all claim to look at applications in bulk. I promise that at the very least, practically, that's not how it's turned out. All my mentees that have submitted early have had more interviews, more secondaries, more acceptances than those who have waited for some times. So please really consider having all your material ready by May 1st through May 15th. Other parts. Once you submit a primary application for many schools, you'll start to hear back about secondary applications. These questions are going to be more unique to each school. For example, Texas Tech or A&M might ask you more about why you would want to work either in primary care or rural care, which is something that they really emphasize, versus UT Southwestern, which is very research heavy, as well as Baylor. They may want to hear more about your research interests. These are examples of things that could be on your secondary essays, which again is why it's important to know about these schools beforehand. So not using these secondaries as just ways to rush through or get to the interview is critical. A lot of people think that it's just another stepping stone that can be skipped over, but rather it's a really important part where they're looking more specifically at you and your match to the school. Those extra essays we talked about earlier are also vital. Personal characteristics and optional. Again, optional, not optional. This is your place to stand out. A lot of my mentees, they ask me, my story doesn't feel very unique. It's, I've heard so many people say the same thing. Maybe you had a relative who was sick, or your parent is a doctor, and they say, how do I stand out? Probably every other applicant has a similar story. And what I want to emphasize is that just like the notes on a piano, there may only be a set number of notes, but then there is also a number of styles, techniques, emotions that you may have at that time that add color and variation to those notes. In the same way, most of my mentees are right. There's only so many stories that are out there. But what makes those stories unique is the lived experiences that are different from every applicant. Even if you have the shared story of a parent being a physician or seeing a loved one deal with the hospital system, there are things that make you stand out, and those two essays are where you can really highlight that. Finally, ranking the schools that you want to attend just based off Doximity or some online ranking portals is not going to be the way to go. You really want to spend time so that you end up in a city that you are happy with, in a program that is setting you up for the ideal residency that you think you may want to pursue. And if you're not sure, perhaps considering a school that's more broad or does more general primary care is the way to go. Versus if you want to be research heavy, thinking about some of the institutions we have here that do focus on research and more tertiary level academic care. So, tips. If you are connected to Texas in some way, which you have to be to apply, whether that is someone who's lived here their whole life, whether you attended school here for undergraduate and you'd like to stay here, whether you have a job, a business, a property that you manage, etc., really emphasize that. The optional essay would be a perfect place to put that. Or the personal characteristics essay, if you can somehow tie in that you came from, I know it's kind of a bad word, but California, or one of the states that everyone's immigrating from, if you can say, hey, I spent my 4 years at UT, UTD, A&M, what have you, and I'm a Texan. Maybe, I don't know, my parents stole me from Texas and moved me over there. They didn't tell me, but really I'm a Texan. That's what these Texas schools want to see, is that you have the heart, the characteristics, and the discipline to stay here and serve our population. So as I mentioned, using that optional essay in a way that is most effective, whether that is for establishing how you've become a Texan, or if you're already living in Texas, talking about why you want to stay, etc., or something just unique, if that's already apparent in your other essays, that's great. Finally, something that I talk to all my mentees about is how you choose your letters of recommendation. A lot of people want to get the dean, the professor that got the Nobel Peace Prize, someone who appears very prestigious on paper. But what I want to tell you is you want to get someone who knows you. It could be your boss at a medical scribing job. It could be a doc that you shadowed who is not necessarily the most well accoladed or well-known doctor, but a private practice, community practice doctor who you've gotten to know very intimately and personally. That is the person who's going to know you. That's the person who's going to be able to write a letter of rec where if I crossed out all the names, I could still say, oh, this is about so-and-so. I could say that blindly, that they're talking about this person. I can just feel their character exuding from this letter. Those are who your letter writers should be. Whether those are employers in Texas, whether that's someone you've worked with in Texas, a volunteer organizer for a Texas-based program. Again, we're really harping on Texas because we want to make sure that the reviewers know you want to be a Texas resident, you want to help Texans. Those are the people to consider for your letters of rec, the ones who really know the real you. So, as we mentioned before, and as I demonstrated just with one example of many from UT McGovern, Texas really likes community service. We really care about seeing a dedication to healthcare disparities, how you're helping underserved populations. And again, get unique about this. It doesn't have to feel like checking a box. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, everyone does this, so I do this. Find your interest and find a way to apply it to those populations in need. For example, you like to play piano or guitar. See if there's a nursing home in your area that would be open to having a student come by once a week and play with the residents, play some music for them. Maybe there is a special needs preschool in your area and they need someone who can help do crochet, some kind of knitting, play with Legos if you like Legos. There's some way to combine your interests with the needs of your community in such a way that you're not just checking a box. You should be having fun. You should be doing the same thing you're planning on doing the rest of your career to help and to heal others. And this is something I work with folks all the time with. I love figuring out creative ways to make it so it doesn't feel like a chore for you. I've never tried to do any volunteering or any service that's felt like a chore. I've always had so much fun with it because I find the things I like and I find the things my community needs. For example, I'm a big runner. I found a group that does walking, jogging, running with individuals recovering from alcohol addiction, opioids, and homelessness. And so every time I go out to walk, jog, or run with those guys, I'm having a great time. I would be there even if nobody ever checked any boxes or saw it on my resume. And we need to find that version of what it is to you. Having a holistic approach that shows that is critical. Being able to say, I'm not just someone going and volunteering at the nursing home like everyone else. I'm someone who's an avid reader. So I bring my history of literature. I bring my skills in this sector and I combine it with that. We really like to see well-rounded, broad applicants that have a passion and dedication to their communities. Again, those who are in state have a significant advantage with 90% of seats being reserved for Texas residents. And consequently, those who are out of state face tougher competition. Many people are applying to get that cheaper tuition. As we saw, our out of state is frequently cheaper than other schools in states. So you're competing against a lot of out of state people looking for a good, cheap education. And we've talked about a number of ways to strengthen your fit as a out of state or an in-state applicant. And once we start getting into the details, that's when you need to connect with your professors, the doctors you've shadowed, your PIs from research, or if that's still something you're struggling with, an admissions counselor to get some further support as an in-state or an out-of-state applicant. Finally, craft a Texas-focused and a Texas-sized narrative. Everything's bigger in Texas, so should your personality and your story be. Show how your background experiences, whether they started in Texas, whether they started out of the country, out of the state, brought you to being a real Texan at heart. Once you have some of those ideas, get working ASAP. For those of you in the call right now, if you're applying this cycle, it's March 19th right now, whatever you can do in the next 6 weeks is going to be really, really important so that May 1st, when that application opens up, you don't have to stress about writing your personal statement. You should just be focused on how you put all the information in, making sure that little details, things aren't missing, making sure that your letter writers have time to submit their letters of recommendation so that with the functional rolling basis that most medical schools operate on, you have the best chance of pre-matching early because many people can be done by November, December of their application year if they already hear back about their pre-match. Imagine that. That's a whole winter break where you can relax. Early fall is easy. And once February, March come around and match day comes up, you know exactly where you're going. You may have already known for 3-4 months if you can start getting these things done early. My final tips is be proactive as possible. I like to tell all my mentees when they're brainstorming their personal statement, ask their family and friends for the top 3 characteristics that they would use to describe them. So for example, I might give my mom and dad a piece of paper and say, hey, by the end of the week, can you just put down the 3 words that come to your mind when you think of me? And I'll text my friends and my research mentor the same. Hey, when you get a chance, just 3 words, 3 ideas that come to mind when my name comes up, when you get a text from me. If I bug them too much, it might just be 1 annoying, 2 annoying, 3 annoying, but hopefully that's not the case for you. Instead, once you get those, you can use that as the basis of your personal statement. You can start thinking, what are the terms that keep coming up with everyone? Is it innovative? Is it strong initiative, proactive, empathetic, etc.? And craft your narrative around that if you feel that it aligns with your own self-identity. That's a really good way to be proactive early, super easy. After this call, all of you can do that right now. Just make a copy-paste text message. Hey, I'm getting ready to apply and want to start thinking of some characteristics that embody me. You mind sending me 3? Copy-paste, send to 10 of your closest friends. Easy peasy. Once you're there, start brainstorming. Just put things down. The hardest step is to get pen to paper. Once you do that, you can work with peers. You can work with family, friends, doctors, if you have upperclassmen that have already applied. And as I keep mentioning, admissions counselors like myself are more than happy to work with you. Coming into my final year of med school, I have a lot of time, and I'm really eager to help get people to come and replace me in the Texas medical schools. Tailor your application to Texas schools. We've got a number of counselors who are in Texas or from Texas that can really give you some insight. There's also the Houston rodeo going on for the next 5 days. Come by and absorb some Texas. Really, some of these things sound silly, but we want you to feel like this is the place that you'd want to spend your career, or at least part of your career. Okay. Finally, once you've taken care of all these steps, you've interviewed, we need to think about where you're matching. Texas is not ubiquitous. Texas is really unique. It's the only state where you can travel 8 hours and you're still in Texas. I was just in El Paso last weekend. I drove 9 hours there and I didn't leave the state once. And El Paso, West Texas is so different from North, South, Central, East Texas. Having that clear idea, especially if you've never visited, is going to be really important for how you order your match priorities.
Okay, thank you so much, Benji. I know we really touched on a lot, and I feel like I'm literally an honorary Texan by being a part of this webinar. Before we get to our Q&A section, I just want to flag that if you have an opportunity to share feedback, if there's something about this webinar that you really loved and you'd love to see more, or if there's something you think that maybe we should be incorporating in these webinars, we really want to hear from you. So go ahead and scan that QR code below to share your thoughts, ways we can improve, things that you really like about us, things that you really like about Benji, what you'd like Benji to talk about a little bit more. Your feedback really helps us offer better guidance in future sessions and even offer fresh new topics that we know our attendees really want to hear about. So don't be shy. Feel free to just let us know. Would love to hear it. I see a hand raised as we get into our Q&A section. I think that was from Christine. Christine, if you don't mind just typing that question in the chat box. If that was a mistake, then I'll just disregard that. But let's get all our questions typed in the chat box so everybody else can see it if they have the same question. And then we are killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I see one coming in, so that's great. I'll read it out. Eliana asks, which would be a better mentor for meds in your experience? Is it colleges, pre-med advisors, or medical doctors from nearby hospitals?
Great question, Eliana. And I see you're one of the people from Laredo, Texas, so you're already at an advantage. Congrats. Better mentors for pre-meds. It kind of depends what you're looking for mentorship for. This is something when I was in college, I struggled a lot with. I thought that I need to find the mentor that is the perfect fit, same values, same mindset, same path as me. And what you'll find instead is you might have a different mentor for different things. So what that means is for the process of going through pre-med, for example, what classes to take, when to take the MCAT, how to sign up for the MCAT, etc. I would say that a pre-med advisor at your college is the person to go to. They're the ones with a lot more recent experience with that, and they're the ones that are going to give you the best advice. In regard to a career in medicine, what it's like financially to be a doctor, what it's like to work in a given field, a medical doctor from a nearby hospital is going to be your better mentor. For example, you might have a really, really great doctor who's in their 50s, 60s, and their insight into the medical application process and pre-med may not be as accurate just because it's a different time. But their insight into what it means to be a doctor, to practice, is going to be a lot greater than someone who is working professionally as a pre-med counselor or career advisor. So you are unlikely to find someone who's both unless they're recently graduated medical school and they're a recent doctor, but you'll have to figure out exactly what you need mentorship for.
Amazing. Christine, I see your question about asking if the webinar is going to be recorded. It is, and we'll be sending out the recording of the webinar 24 hours after it ends. So stay tuned for that in your email mailbox 24 hours from now. Question from Irabor. What would be the best way to ask a professor for a letter of recommendation if it's been a while since you've been in their class?
Irabor, great question. And these are the professors that would be ideal to get letters of rec from. It's the professors who you TA'd for, that you went to office hours. So consider also who you're asking for. You want to make sure that they remember your name. Now, I'm a huge advocate for in-person. I know it sounds kind of like grandpa telling you I stood out of the CEO's office and I got a job. And there's some merit to that. I think that if it's been a while since you've talked to that professor, if you're able to, if they still host an in-person class, attending a lecture, whether you attend the whole thing or just slip in at the end so you can actually get some face-to-face time, stopping by their office hours and saying, taking the initiative, say, hey, I already took this class, but this was a lecture I really liked. A friend sent me the syllabus and I wanted to come by and ask some questions. Reaching out to them if they do research and saying, hey, I read your paper from 2023 where you talked about XYZ, and I just had some questions, some thoughts. Are you still doing this research, etc.? You really have to give them something unique about yourself for them to write a good letter and for them to be incentivized to write it. All these things are two-way processes. Professors get asked all the time to write letters, and it makes it a much easier job for them if you show some interest in what they do and if you show some genuine dedication to their field, to their class, etc. So ultimately, my answer is I would try to show up to a class. If it's a virtual class, I would see if you can schedule a meeting with them virtually. Again, maybe with some bait, say, hey, I had a chance to read this paper, just remembered how much I liked your class. Can I talk to you about it? People love that kind of flattery, especially researchers. So those would be my two tips, whether in person or virtual.
Amazing. Okay, question from Vijaya Lakshmi. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Can you provide more clarity on what needs to be included in the optional essay? Thanks.
Yeah, do you mind going back a few slides? I have the specific prompt for the optional essay up there, but as we're doing that, I can't tell you anything specific that's going to be on there. This is really going to be unique to you, and this is where you need to take that time to check in with yourself, to check in with your friends and family about something that is a unique experience. My recommendation is that if it's not otherwise highlighted on your essay, you can take this time to highlight the reasons why you'd be a good applicant if you're coming from out of state. So again, the optional essay prompt is to briefly discuss any unique circumstances or life experiences relevant to your application, which have not previously been presented. So it's really broad. This might be a place you talk about being a military veteran if you served some time in the military before applying. If you are a non-traditional applicant because you're applying 8 years out of college, you worked as a librarian, you worked as a lab tech, whatever it is, this is the place to talk about what's going on or what that is. Again, my recommendation is that if it's not been otherwise mentioned, this be the place you lean on why you would be a good Texas applicant. But again, there's no specific requirement. It's pretty broad, gives you the chance to shine.
Okay, question from Michael. If I plan to retake my MCAT in August, is it still smart to apply early, or should I wait until everything is complete?
Thanks, Michael. And for this one, could you actually flip to the slide I have of the 2025 TMDSAS timeline? Michael, if you are taking the MCAT in August, yeah, this is perfect. So we can even see here that various sections need to be completed at certain points. So let's see, early decision, medical student, all sections, October 1st, August 1st. So you'll see some programs have submission deadlines by August 1st. So in regard to retaking it, you won't find out for several weeks after that. So some of those schools may limit you in terms of where you can apply. Is it still smart to apply early? If you're okay with your MCAT score, and we have a whole webinar about retaking and average scores and all that, I would still apply with that score, just because your chances are going to be greater based on rolling admissions. Now, there is a program and a website called MSAR where you can see all the different average and median MCAT scores. And so you can gauge what schools are realistic for you based off that. I do that with my mentees all the time, just work through different schools through the MSAR, what's realistic and what's not, and gauge whether we not need a retake or not. August, I will say, is going to be a little bit later because you're only hearing back in September. So you're missing out on a lot of school. You can see October, they're already doing early decisions. But at that point, it would be a decision based on your original one. And I'll drop my email in a bit. I'm happy to correspond more later so that we have time for some of these other questions. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, a question from Eliana. Do passion projects count as extracurriculars, like a podcast or a blog?
Oh, yeah, 100%. One thing that I like to strategize with my applicants is, depending on their whole application, what they have, which way you want to classify certain things. So, for example, if you were doing some medical assistant work or medical scribing, and as part of that, you were also shadowing, you may decide strategically where it should go, whether it's clinical hours versus work experience, right? In the same way, if you have a passion project, like a podcast or blog, depending on what your other things look like, there may be a most effective way to categorize that. But I would definitely consider that as some type of extracurricular, whether it's a leadership activity because you started the podcast or blog, whether it's going into the optional essay section as something unique about you. And then, of course, depending on the details of the content of that blog or podcast, it may be more medically oriented or health, or if neither, that's also great and can be spun some other way. So yeah, those are awesome things. Schools love to see that you're not just a robot. They want to see that you have some interests and you can bring that into account.
Okay, question from Christine. If I got a C- in my biochem class, do I have to repeat it, or will there be, I think she's asking, do I have to repeat biochem to get accepted? But if I'm not getting that right, feel free to rephrase the question, Christine.
Hey, Christine. This is a little bit hard to answer without broader context. If this is within the pattern of maybe some other classes you struggled with, it could be worth either retaking or, depending on what your final GPA comes out as, doing a post-bac year. 1 C is not going to exclude you from all the schools. If you're applying out of state, a couple of C's or a handful of C's may make it more challenging, but 1 single C in the context of otherwise good grades shouldn't be a problem. This is another place where I would suggest maybe some more individualized exploration of the MSAR. I actually did that with one of my mentees last week. We just went through all the Texas schools. And so to your next question that I see, I'll just read it out ahead of time. Christine asked, what's the average or minimum MCAT for Texas med schools? It varies. Most of them are going to be over, and I'm talking about allopathic medical schools. Most of them are going to be at least 508 or above. But each school is going to have different averages. Each school is also going to have a different percentile range. So something that I like to do when people already have their MCATs or GPAs, et cetera, is to go through and see what schools they would be a safety, what schools would be a medium fit, and what schools would be a reach. And that's something I'm happy to do with some more context information. But yeah, I encourage you to look up MSAR. Some of this information is available on other blogs and websites where they'll put it all together for you to see more consolidated information.
Okay, amazing. Thanks, Benji. It looks like we still have time for a couple more questions, so feel free to keep them coming. In the meantime, Benji, I'm wondering if you could offer some perspective as somebody that's been through Texas medical schools, helped numerous applicants with their applications to Texas medical schools. What would you say is the most important part of the application, and how can people use that to their strength? And in the scenario where normally they would struggle, how can they overcome that and really have an all-around strong application?
Yeah, so I always do a simple framework for my mentees of When someone is reading your application, they have to be able to answer 3 principal questions. Could you do it? Would you do it? Should you do it? And this is a really good way for you to organize the places where you may need to spend a little bit more time on if you're struggling, where you might need to overcome, and options for you to stand out if you're a little bit deficit in one of those. Could you do it? This is just the numbers. This is just getting the foot in the door with a GPA and MCAT. This is saying medical school is hard, medical school is competitive. Could this applicant meet the rigors academically? Unfortunately, this is all just going to be your undergraduate GPA and your MCAT. Okay. The next section is, would you do it? This is saying in this applicant's free time, when nobody's watching, when it's the weekend and they could go party instead, they could go relax, watch TV, watch TikTok, would they actually go and be part of their community, right? We're all trying to be doctors. We're all trying to be leaders in our community. And you have to start living by that ideal. You have to start showing that, hey, this is something I just enjoy. This is part of my life. So that means this is your extracurriculars. This is your volunteering. This is starting a podcast where you're interviewing doctors in your area that are doing something unique, etc. These are your extracurriculars, the would you do it. Finally, you have the should you do it. And this is your personal statement and letters of recommendation. This is really my recommendation for where you can stand out. If you're struggling a little bit on the GPA and the MCAT, but just enough to get your foot in the door. If you haven't gotten all the extracurriculars and leadership that you might want, your big chance to stand out in Texas is going to be your personal characteristics and your personal statement with that optional, not optional essay. So the way that I like to frame my personal statement is by 3 characteristics and 3 stories that exemplify that with some unifying theme throughout. This is why I told people earlier, try to see if you can ask people and figure out 3 common characteristics that are unique to you. And then 3 unique stories that you've experienced in life that have either developed those qualities or exemplified those qualities. And finally, some kind of unifying, some kind of bonding theme of your life, of your journey to being a medical doctor that puts those things together. So again, when you're looking over your essay on May 1st or May 15th, when you're looking over your application, you have to be able to say from the position of a reviewer, could you do it? Would you do it? Should you do it? And when you're happy with those 3 questions, that's when it's time to apply. I'm happy to help, Cassidy, and I'll share my email in just a moment, maybe while I'm hearing this next question. So feel free to read the next question while I pull my email.
Yeah, this is a question actually about Inspira Consult. So if Eliana or anybody was able to work with you, I'm just curious about which ones are complimentary, and if she were to continue with the program, like what does that look like? What do certain packages look like?
Yeah, we have a number of packages. I will say my personal modus operandi is email correspondence is effectively gratis. I'm happy to correspond via email as much as I'm able to and as much as you need help with. I always like to do an open 1-hour meeting free of charge, just kind of get to know each other. After that, we start talking about different package options, what you might be looking for, whether it's specifically for MCAT tutoring, which I don't do as much of. I do a lot more on the admissions side, but we have some great MCAT tutors. Versus if you want the full-blown kind of medical counseling package from start to finish, that's one pathway to go versus hourly advising, which I really enjoy. I do a lot of. There's a number of different packages, all available to view on our website that we can share a link to as well. But again, my personal modus operandi, you have my email. Please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to correspond if it's for quick questions. If it's for bigger things, I do like to have a meeting where I can get to know you a bit better. And that first meeting is always free of charge.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to add to that, a lot of the consultants that we work with have, different areas of expertise. So it could be a matter of, taking a look and seeing, who really is a match with what you're looking for. I also want to flag that we do offer these webinars free of charge. So, today it's all about getting into Texas medical schools, but we do webinars on a number of topics pertaining to, the application process, the MCAT, writing the MCAT, retaking the MCAT, interviews, et cetera, et cetera. So if you visit our website, you'll be able to see when the next one is. I believe there's one there should be one right after this one. I will have to find the title of that. But even we do them like weekly. So if there's something that catches your eye, feel free to join us. We'll have a counselor like Benji, or it will be Benji, talking about a certain subject, and you'll be able to pick his brain on that. In addition to that, we do have recaps of our previous webinars on our YouTube page, which I will put in the chat. So if you're really curious about a certain topic that maybe we haven't really touched on, feel free to just look at our YouTube library. And we may have already done a webinar on that. You may get be able to find some insights from other counselors, or maybe somebody's asked the same question that you have in the chat box and it's been answered within the webinar. So there really is a wealth of information that we offer. So feel free to go ahead and look as well. And let me go ahead and get that link for you. Still have a couple of minutes, maybe room for 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll have to wrap up. So keep those questions coming in. I was wondering, Benji, while we wait, could you talk a little bit about, I know like applying for med school is, a really nerve-wracking experience, whether, you're just starting or you're just finishing. I'm wondering if you could talk about ways to kind of alleviate stress during this process.
That's a great question. A lot of people starting in, frankly, middle school, high school, college, deal with this incredible anxiety of getting into medical school and getting past it. And, what's scary is it's not going to get necessarily easier as a resident or an attending physician. Now you're dealing with patient lives. You've got multiple patients. You've got people calling you. And so you have to start building foundational elements to prevent burnout, to prevent that anxiety and stress from overcoming you and making it impossible to function. My core tenets are always going to be good sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And that's nothing, secret or mystical. But what's secret and mystical about it is how to really get those habits set up. And for me, that is having a really good, rigorous schedule that I follow. I'm really good about my calendar. I put even the smallest things. I like to put, exercise here, lunch, breakfast, dinner here to make sure I'm eating all my meals. I like to do meal prep ahead of time to reduce the amount of questions and thoughts and decisions I have to make on otherwise busy days. And my big plug is really for outdoor exercise. Again, personally, I'm a runner. I love to run outside, but if you want to rock climb, if you like to walk, if you like to do outdoor swimming, whatever it is, ideally, if it can be outside, your day is going to be so much better. I promise. So many people think, oh, I can't waste this hour on working out. I need it to study. If you spend that 1 hour to work out, your next few hours of studying will be 1.5 to 2 times more effective. So you're making up all that missed time by helping your body, staying healthy, keeping your brain active and healthy. So my biggest plug is outdoor exercise, whether it's walking, jogging, biking. There's so many ways to do it. It's such a good way to get your social time in. And I hope that as people that want to take care of other people's health, we start by taking care of our own and demonstrating fit, healthy, happy bodies to our patients, to our family and friends, and encouraging them as exemplars in the community. And my experience has been that this really reduced the stress of taking the MCAT, applying, working through medical school, rounds, rotations, etc. And then I'm happy to answer this last question. I can read it out if we have time. Is that okay?
We'll have to wrap it up. So if it's like a really, really quick answer, yes. But if not, I think there's another webinar starting right now. So
okay. Eliana, some people take loans, some people work part-time, and some people pay it off afterwards when they're getting an attending salary. But shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk more.
Amazing. Thank you. Appreciate the prompt response. That's all the time we have. So I want to thank you all again for joining us. Like I mentioned, we have webinars very frequently, so make sure to visit our website and sign up for the webinars that you're interested in. Like I mentioned, this webinar is recorded, so we'll be sending it out to you shortly. Thank you so much for all the interactivity. Thank you, Benji, for all the insights. Much appreciated. And we will see you at the next webinar. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night.